Marianne! I finally read a book that so many people have been telling me to read, and it is a Hello my sweet angels, it's your girl Jay, and today I am here with my December mid-month wrap-up for 2024. It is currently the 15th of December, and I've already read 8 books, and I have time this weekend, so I figured we are going to film a mid-month wrap-up so at the end of the month it's not as stressful for me. So without further ado, let us get started. The first book that I'm going to talk about is Rules for Second Chances. This is by Maggie North, and I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. This one follows Liz Lewis. She is a very quiet people pleaser. She has been following her husband Tobin around for years until she can't take it anymore. She gets mistaken for a waitress at her own 30th birthday party, and so she decides that she is no longer going to be meek and mild. She ends up joining an improv class in the hopes of gaining more confidence and a promotion at work. In the hopes of saving their marriage, Tobin agrees to help Liz with her improv class and beat her social anxiety. This was an okay second chance romance, but I don't think it was anything new or original to the genre. I did really like the character growth that Liz had. She definitely did become more confident and sure of herself. I wish that we had gotten a few chapters from Tobin's point of view. I think that that would have made it easier for me to connect with him. I felt like a lot of what we were seeing of Tobin was just that Liz thought he was hot and wanted to sleep with him. I did like their scenes together though. They did have some pretty good chemistry, so overall it was okay. The next 2 books that I have are part of the same series. I started it last month, I completed the trilogy this month, but it is The School for Good and Evil's book 2 and 3. Book 2 is A World Without Princes, and book 3 is The Last Ever After. I give this one a 3.5 stars and the third book a 4 stars. The story basically follows best friends Sophie and Agatha. They are completely opposite. Sophie has always believed that she is going to become a fairy tale princess, so when she gets the opportunity to go to the school for good, she obviously takes it. But the twist is that she is deposited into the school for evil, and her best friend Agatha is deposited in the school for good, and she will basically stop at nothing in order to get access to the school for good, and it's kind of the story of that. So this second book takes place a few months after that first book finishes. And although I didn't enjoy this second installment as much as I did the first, I still had fun reading it. I do think that this installment was a little bit problematic in its messages given to young readers because it is a middle grade series. I think that it was very sexist, but I do really love these characters and their complex personalities. I do think that some of the character development that we saw in the first book definitely regressed a little bit in this one. I do have a few minor gripes on this book in particular, specifically Agatha's characterization. I feel like her personality did a complete flip-flop from what we saw in the first book. I also wasn't the biggest fan that Agatha had to choose between her friendship with Sophie and her romance with Tedros. And then my other gripe is Tedros. I found him to be very annoying in this one. He was just constantly whining about how it was so unfair that Sophie and Agatha rejected him as a love interest, and he was very, very violent towards the two of them, and it was just like a weird messaging. And I just thought it was a little weird for a middle grade book because it hit a little bit too close to home that when males get rejected, they often do turn violent. Not every male, but some of them, so it was just a little scary. But I did really love the side characters of Hester, Annadil, and Dot, and I really want like a spin-off series featuring them because they were a lot of fun. But that leads me to the conclusion of this series, which I gave a 4 stars. I think that it was a really fun finale for the trilogy. I do think that it is quite the chunker of a book, especially for a middle grade, and I don't think that it necessarily needed to be this long, but I still had fun reading it. I like that we dove deeper into the backstory of Agatha and Sophie. I think it tied the story together quite nicely. I like that we saw so many familiar faces, but we were also introduced to a lot of new ones as well. I think that it was really fun seeing all the old fairy tale villains and heroes in this and how they had the opportunity to rewrite their stories. I was satisfied with how this ended, but I do think that I will like to pick up the Camelot years. There's another 3 books in the series, but it's not part of the series, it's like an interconnected series. So I am intrigued, but I don't own them, so I don't know if I'm going to pick them up, but if they happen to fall into my lap, I probably will. Next up, I finally read a book that so many people have been telling me to read, and it is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. This is basically the story of Dracula's first bride, and it is told all through the form of a letter to Dracula. I was so enamored with this book right from the very first page. I was hooked instantly. I ended up finishing the book in 3 hours because I was so engrossed in the writing. Like I said, this is told through a long letter to Dracula from his first bride, and the complicated relationships in this are so fun to read about. They are so multi-layered, and it was so interesting to see how they ebbed and flowed throughout the centuries that this took place in. I would absolutely love a companion novel of the 3 lovers to see where they ended up after they all separated in the end. I just think it would be super interesting to see what happened with them, but I really like this. I give it a 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read At Her Service by Amy Spalding, and I give this one a 3 out of 5 stars. This one follows Max. She works as a talent agent assistant, but she has dreams of improving her life. She wants to do this in 2 ways. She wants a promotion, and she wants to get a girlfriend. When her influencer roommate Chelsea suggests that she participate in a self-actualization app and let her document it on her social media channels, Max reluctantly agrees. I liked this for the most part, but I do think at times I was a little bit bored with the story. I think that it had a very slow start. It felt like it took a while for anything to actually start to happen. I do think that Max was a pretty relatable character. I think a lot of people are going to be able to see themselves in her, especially if you're in your early 20s. This is advertised as a romance, and honestly, I don't really think that it is a romance. I think it's more a story of self-discovery with a little romance sprinkled into it. There is definitely more of a focus on Max's journey rather than the romance aspect of it. But I did really enjoy the journey that Max went on in becoming more confident in herself and actually going for what she wanted. I did really like Sadie as a love interest, but I do wish that we had gotten more of a backstory on her. This is another one where I really, really wish that we had gotten a point of view from the love interest, because I think that that would have really helped bring her character to life. But overall, this one was okay as well. I give it a 3 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Diet Soda Club by Chaz Hayden, and I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. This one follows Reed, who, when their mother unexpectedly goes on vacation, he must take care of his 10-year-old sister who has spinal muscular atrophy until she returns. He turns to some questionable means in order to get the money for not only food, but his sister's medical bills as well. This was a very heartbreaking story, but it did have a hopeful ending, which was nice. Beatrice, the younger sister, was definitely the highlight of the story for me. She's 10 years old and she is just so full of life, even though she is very sick. I thought she was absolutely adorable. She is definitely the comic relief to what could have been a very bleak story. I also thought that the sibling relationship between Beatrice and Reed was very sweet. I also really liked the growing relationship between Reed and Helena as well. I think that it was very interesting to see their friendship develop as the story progressed. I also think that the idea of the Diet Soda Club was really fun, and I really liked that aspect of the story as well. I do think that the fiasco that he got up to at school was a little bit far-fetched, but if you can just suspend your belief a little bit, this is a very enjoyable story. I give it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next up is another one that I have been holding off on for so long now, and everybody is telling me to read it, and I finally did. It's The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. I give this one a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. This one follows Vivian Jones, who is a witch, and when she has a little bit of a messy breakup, she decides that she is going to drown her sorrows in vodka. Then she jokingly curses her ex-boyfriend and thinks nothing of it. Then 9 years later, he returns to her small town to help with powering the ley lines, and she discovers that her curse may have actually worked, and he is going through it. I thought this was a very cute and fun read. I read it incredibly quickly in one day. I fell in love with these characters, not only Vivi and Reese, but also the side characters. Gwen and Elaine were so much fun, and I really hope that we get a spin-off series with them. I know that there are 2 other books in this, but I don't know who they follow. Maybe it's them, and if so, I will definitely be picking it up. I really loved the banter between Vivi and Reese. I thought that their chemistry was off the charts. I was definitely rooting for them right from their reconnection. I wanted them so desperately to resolve their issues. Also, absolutely obsessed with Sir Percival. I am so in love with that stinking cute little kitty. I think that this would make such a fun movie, so I really hope that one day it gets adapted. I would definitely check that out. And then the final book that I'm going to talk about for this mid-month wrap-up is The Antique Hunter's Guide to Murder by C.L. Miller. I gave this one a 2.5 out of 5 stars, so we are leaving off on a little bit of a womp womp, but that's okay. This one follows Freya, who returns to the antique world after being away for 20 years after the death of her mentor and old employer, Arthur. She receives a coded letter from Arthur, who makes her think that his death may have been a murder. So she teams up with Arthur's old friend and her aunt, Carol, to determine what actually happened to Arthur. And they get up to a little bit of mischief along the way. I wanted to like this, but unfortunately I was very bored throughout the whole story. I think that it was extremely repetitive. This is definitely a case of telling your readers, not showing them. It felt almost like the author thought that we were idiots and she had to explain everything so thoroughly because we wouldn't be able to grasp it. I also would love somebody to count the amount of times that the word darling was used in this book, because it's gotta be at least 500 times. I did like how each of the chapters started with a quote from Arthur that kind of hooked you into what was going to happen. I was definitely invested enough in what happened in Cairo, which is a big part of this book, and also the mystery behind Arthur's death, that I kept reading, but I can't necessarily say that I enjoyed my time reading. I do think that some people would really enjoy this, so I'm not saying don't read it, but it just definitely wasn't for me. So I give it a 2.5 out of 5 stars. Alright everybody, so those were the 8 books that I have read so far in the month of December 2024. Obviously at the end of the month there will be another wrap up with all the rest of the books that I read, so definitely check that out once it's uploaded. But let me know down below if you have read any of these books and what you thought of them, and I will see you all in my next video. Goodbye!